Okay, Belinda. Just an introduction for Belinda, one of our speakers today. Belinda and I have known each other for many, many years. We started working together in 2011. She has a Bachelor of Medical Laboratory Science from JCU, and she's also a nutrient therapy practitioner, certified gluten practitioner, primary certification from ACNAM, also is a theta healing practitioner, and also has advanced laboratory analysis training. So Belinda, I'll hand over to you now, darling.
Thanks heaps, Rhonda. I just want to quickly touch base. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a nutrient therapy practitioner, which basically means I like to go in and find the root cause of what's going on inside your body and then what we need to do to correct that. And I work with my clients with diet and lifestyle and targeted supplementation to really bring about health back to their body. And I feel like it's a privilege for me to work with people who actually want to transform their health and better their health for their families and themselves. I got into this. I was a medical laboratory scientist for 15 years, and I got into the health prevention and natural side of health because of my children. I have two beautiful children, my daughter Delilah and my son Hamish, and Delilah took us a while to get her, and when we did get her, I couldn't work out why she cried all the time, and that's when I started working with Rhonda, and our relationship evolved from there. She obviously had lots of gut issues going on, food sensitivities and major anxiety. And at the time I was also pregnant with my son, and turns out he's actually anaphylactic to dairy and has multiple chemical sensitivity as well. So I've started this journey to help my kids, and I've ended up helping our whole family, and now I love to pass that knowledge on and help my clients and their families as well. Today we're going to be talking about mitochondrial health, but first I just wanted to give us a brief overview of really what our mitochondria are, and to do that I need to put everything into context for you. So we have 7 levels of organisation in our body, and the very bottom level is the atomic level. So that's our carbon and hydrogen and oxygen atoms. And when those atoms come together, they form molecules. So those molecules form to make our DNA, carbon dioxide, all of those things that are the chemical reactions going on inside our body. From the molecular level, all those structures then come together and they can form cells, which is our cellular level. And cells get grouped together for their function. So we have stomach cells and muscle cells. And then when those cells come together to form tissues, those tissues have certain functions. So we have the muscle cells in our lungs and our heart are different than to the cells in our skin, our neurons, those sorts of things. Then when those tissues come together to form, so many different types of tissues will come together to form an organ, and that organ has a specific function. So that's like our heart and our stomach and our liver, our pancreas, our spleen. Then when those organs come together to function together in a system, that's our systems level. So we have the digestive system, our cardiovascular system, and when all those systems come together and they're working great, even if they're not working great, we still have a body, and that's our whole organism. Can flick over, Rhonda. So when we're talking about our cellular health, all of those molecules have come together to form structures, and the cell is the basic unit of life for all living organisms. Plants have cells, we have cells. There is 37 trillion cells in our body. All of those cells roughly have the same structure internally. So we all have a nucleus, and that nucleus holds our DNA. And all those cells, bar our red blood cells by the way, have mitochondria. So mitochondria are the little powerhouses of our cell, and we're taught that they're the ones that give us the energy. They produce the energy for our body to work, for our lungs to breathe, our heart to pump, our brain to function, us, to move our arm. All of that requires energy, and our mitochondria are responsible for that. And we're really going to focus in on those today. So our cells like to breathe, especially just like we do, and the mitochondria are how our cells respire, how our cells breathe. In our body, there is every cell, so 37 trillion cells, every cell has mitochondria, and every cell has many mitochondria. So our brain, our eyes and our heart have about 10,000 mitochondria per cell. So if you think of how many cells make up your heart, in every single one of those cells, there is 10,000 mitochondria. So we have a phenomenal amount of mitochondria in those cells. Our liver cells have about 2,000 mitochondria in them, and our skin cells have about 200. So the more work the organ does, the more mitochondria it has in its cells. If we flick over to the next slide, our mitochondria, this is a very basic picture of a very complicated structure, but basically we have an outer membrane and an inner membrane. The outer membrane protects the inner structures, and it contains things like porins, which are transport channels for nutrients to get into the mitochondria, for our mitochondria to turn those nutrients into energy. The inner membrane has what we call cristae, and they're lots of little tiny folds, and it kind of reminds me of the small intestine, because our small intestine has lots of folds all over each other, and that's to increase the surface area. So what happens inside the cristae, or on the cristae, is what we call the electron transport chain, and that's part of our energy production line. So inside the cristae is the mitochondrial matrix, and that's where our Krebs cycle happens. So the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain are the biochemical processes where we convert our food into energy. And when we convert that food into energy, we get ATP, which is our body's energy currency. We get water, heat, and also reactive oxygen species as a byproduct. Inside that matrix, where the Krebs cycle is happening, contains the mitochondrial DNA, ribosomes and enzymes and other cofactors that are needed for the Krebs cycle to work. So that's where our nutrients go for that Krebs cycle to tick over. The mitochondrial DNA is different from our nuclear DNA. So inside every cell has a nucleus, and inside that nucleus is our DNA that we got from our parents. So we get half a set from mum and half a set from dad. And then in our mitochondria, they have their own set of DNA. So they're able to replicate themselves. So if they get damaged or we need to make new cells, the mitochondria actually replicate themselves to make our energy and to keep up with our body's energy requirements, especially as we're growing. So if that mitochondrial DNA is actually only passed down from our maternal bloodline. So I have passed my mitochondrial DNA that I got from my mum, and she got that from her mum, down to my children. So my daughter will pass on our mitochondrial DNA, but my son won't. So he gets stuck with my dodgy mitochondria. And hopefully we can fix that shortly. And he won't pass anything on, but we'll fix him up. So the mitochondria is a very complicated structure, and it does some amazing things in our body. If we tick over to the next slide, Rhonda. So as I mentioned, our mitochondria is responsible or produces our body's energy, and they're responsible for producing 90% of our body's energy. So if you're not feeling great and you're not having a lot of energy, it might be time to look at your little mitochondria and help to get them back up and functioning properly. Our mitochondria are also responsible for cellular respiration, so oxygen in, carbon dioxide out of the cell. They're responsible for calcium homeostasis. So that basically means it helps to monitor our calcium levels in each cell. And they also help to uptake more calcium, so the cell can take on more calcium than what's needed. The mitochondria use that calcium to help facilitate the entry of nutrients through their membranes. They also support nerve conduction by aiding neurotransmitter release. So what they do is at the end of our nerve synapses, we have little nerve synapse, all the cells that are lining that are filled with mitochondria, and that mitochondria will release calcium into the cell, and then that calcium release causes our neurotransmitters to be released. So our neurotransmitters are things like dopamine, serotonin, GABA, epinephrine, norepinephrine, noradrenaline, and which are really important neurotransmitters for our body to function and for our brain health. So if we don't have great functioning mitochondria, or we don't have great calcium levels, those sorts of things aren't going to happen in our body. Our mitochondria are responsible for what we call cell death, or programmed cell death, apoptosis. And what that means is everything has a shelf life, and when our cells are coming to the end of their shelf life, our mitochondria release caspases, and those caspases then help degrade the cell, and our body just reabsorbs the nutrients from that, and we make new cells. We also have what's called necrosis, so that's cell death from trauma and injury, or just the cells are just so damaged they can't come back from it, the cell just dies. And mitochondria also help to regulate our innate immune system's response. So our innate immune system is our body's first line of defense. And what that means is when we're starting to get sick or invaders come into our body, we get a rise in temperature. Our nose might start running, or we start sneezing. That's our innate immune response. And what our mitochondria do is increase our ATP production to generate more heat, to rise our body temperature, which is the temperature that we get when we're starting to get a virus, and trying to make sure that we have the energy to fight that invader. They also produce what we call reactive oxygen species. So reactive oxygen species are great in small amounts, and that's actually how our mitochondria like to communicate with each other, because there's a great network in amongst our cells between our mitochondria. But what happens when those reactive oxygen species get too much is they damage our mitochondria, they damage the mitochondrial DNA, and they also damage our cellular DNA. So as those levels of damaged, as a level of damage occurs in the cell, so the more damage there is, or the more mutated DNA, mitochondrial DNA we have that's been passed down from our parents. So my damaged mitochondrial DNA has been passed to my daughter. So my accumulated stress and the stress of my mum and my grandma and all those generations before has all come down to this generation. And if we don't fix that, she's going to pass that dysfunction and that damage onto her generation, including the damage that she's done in her lifetime up to the point of conception, onto her babies. So with the percentage of damaged mitochondrial DNA that we're creating and the percentage of mutated DNA that we've been inherited with, that we inherited, as that rises, the level of energy production in those cells actually decreases, and we can't produce energy like we're supposed to. There's lots of nutrients required for our body to tick over, but major ones, oxygen and water. No cell can survive without oxygen and water. Electrolytes are very important, especially those electrolytes that contain, that are carbon derived and that contain fulvic acid. So fulvic acid helps our body helps our cells, I should say, to regulate their water content. Proteins, fats, and carbohydrates are pretty much the foods that we eat, and how we can get those nutrients broken down and get into our mitochondrial cells to help fuel those the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. Good sources, good fats, clean proteins, and not refined carbohydrates. The processed kind tends to strip our body of nutrients. Calcium, potassium, and magnesium are important to create that electrical potential in our cells, and also for the neurotransmitter release. Our B vitamins are really important for our Krebs cycle to tick over and to produce the energy. They're the cofactors in that cycle. And vitamin C and zinc. So vitamin C is actually needed to get certain molecules into our mitochondrial membrane. So what affects our mitochondrial function? Lots of things affect our mitochondrial function. Life affects our mitochondrial function. But some of the major things are viruses. So viruses interfere with the calcium in our mitochondria, and they actually suppress our calcium so that they can survive and spread. And that drop in calcium is a problem, because we need the calcium to help the nutrients get into the mitochondria to keep ticking over our ATP. Calcium is actually required to upregulate our mitochondrial function to generate more energy. Calcium is also crucial for turning ammonia, which is a toxic byproduct of our amino acid metabolism, into urea, so it can be excreted via the kidneys. If we can't neutralize toxins like ammonia, they will damage our mitochondria, because they just seem to build up in our system and cause toxic overload. Some viruses also trigger increased free radical production, so our mitochondria can no longer keep them under control. Parasites. Parasites are not the neighbours that you want to have. They change the environment in our body so that they can stay and replicate inside our cells. And they do this at a significant cost to us. So in order for parasite to survive, they disrupt our cell cycles and prevent normal cell death. They second our mitochondrial function and use that energy production to fuel their own generation. And they interfere, they actually create our cells to produce more free radicals. They kind of like steal our Wi-Fi and take our garden hose and water their own garden, and then we're expected to pay the bill for the internet and the water. So they rob us of our resources and then they leave us to foot the cost. Heavy metals. So heavy metals are a huge one, and I see a lot of people in clinic with heavy metals, and we all know that they're toxic to our system, but the effect that they have on our mitochondria is very detrimental. So they harm both the structure and the function of our mitochondria. So the cristae, which is all the little folds inside the mitochondria and the inner membrane, the heavy metals actually damage that and attack that, and our electron transport chains degrade. So if we don't have that electron transport chain for our Krebs cycle to shift off all the byproducts to, we can't produce that energy. It's essential for the energy production process. Heavy metals like arsenic, aluminium, and mercury actually are very, very detrimental to the cristae of our mitochondria. It decreases the amount of energy that cell is actually able to produce. Heavy metals spike the production of free radicals in our mitochondria, and they increase the permeability of our mitochondrial membranes, which basically means they can't regulate their toxic load, and our cells just fill up with toxins. Heavy metals just destroy our mitochondria in a way that's beyond repair. Medications, and definitely some medications are life-saving, and I know that when I have to take my son to the hospital, I want to know that he's going to get the Ventolin and the oxygen, all those things that he needs to be able to breathe. So some medications are life-saving, and we do need them at certain points in our life. But often, many of the commonly prescribed ones inhibit our mitochondrial function. So what they do is they interfere with the electron transport chain and reduce our ability to make ATP. Some of them create a deficiency of carnitine. So carnitine is a compound that helps transport certain fatty acids into our mitochondria so that they can be transferred into energy. Carnitine also helps to carry toxins out of our mitochondria so they can be eliminated. So if we don't have that molecule, we can't do those things, and our toxic load builds up. Common medications that damage our electron transport chain in our mitochondria are our antibiotics and painkillers like paracetamol, our statin medications used for cholesterol lowering drugs, and antidepressants and mood stabilizers. So whilst these medications are definitely needed at some point, there's a hidden cost there to our body that we're not aware of. The last one on the list there is severe oxidative stress. So as I said, everything in life causes mitochondrial damage, and that's because our environment today is so toxic. So oxidative stress, for those of you who don't know, is if we look at it on a cellular level, on a molecular level, there's one cell, and it has, our cells like to be balanced, by the way, everything likes to be even and balanced, and one cell contains, or one atom contains 2 electrons. What our free radicals have is 1 electron. So they don't like that, they want to be balanced. So they're going to go along and steal an electron from a healthy cell to make their cell balanced again. What that does is creates a chain effect. So if you think of a football field and it's all lined with mouse traps, end to end, side to side, the whole field is covered in mouse traps, and they're all set with a ping pong ball. And one free radical sets off the ping pong ball, and then the whole field's just being set off with ping pong balls. It's just a big chain reaction. What we do know is that antioxidants have an extra electron, so they have 3. So they like to donate an electron to a free radical cell to help neutralize it. All of these things on the list cause oxidative stress, so cause our free radicals to increase in our body. That, over time, causes lots of damage to our mitochondria. You can flick over, Rhonda. So is it all doom and gloom? Or can you imagine what your life would look like if all your mitochondria were working efficiently? I know I'd like my mitochondria to work efficiently, so I do everything I can to do that. But most of us, and I still do, have a toxin build-up, our immune health suffers, our ability for our cells to repair themselves decreases, and chronic diseases set in. Inflammatory molecules are released from our immune cells in response to toxins and place a huge strain on our mitochondria. This increases the oxidative stress and leads to the destruction of our cells, further increasing inflammation. It's a vicious cycle and it's really tough to break. So I'm going to hand you over to Rhonda, and she's going to take us through some of the conditions and how mitochondrial dysfunction plays a huge role in those. And then what are some of the things we can do to repair that damage to our mitochondria and start to resuscitate them. Thanks, Rhonda.
There we go, just unmute myself. Awesome. So can everyone see the screen and hear me okay? If you can give me a thumbs up. Awesome, thank you so much. Okay, so yeah, I love how your brain works, Belinda. Like I've said, I've always been a fan, and anything to do with any of the real tech side of things, I gladly hand over to you. But before we actually go any further, I just want to confirm again that this is purely educational. We're not here to mitigate or cure or claim that we're going to reverse or heal any diseases. Any of the information that we're sharing is purely from our own personal experience, our own training, from me at Rhonda Muller and my business ASD Healthy Life, and also through Belinda Wicks, her business Inside Out Nutritional Therapy. So as you can see by the screen, hopefully it's easy to read, I am a nutritional therapist. I predominantly work with women and children. My passion is pediatric special needs and mental health. I'm also an education consultant. I started my studies back in 2009, predominantly because I wasn't in the health industry. I was actually a small business coach, marketing, event management, things like that was my gig. But as a parent of 4 children, there were significant health issues within my babies, and that's pretty much, I was not getting answers through mainstream. So that's where I started to look outside the box and look at what was really underlying. So like I said, I have 4 children. My youngest was developing like his 2 big brothers. He was running at 8 months. Have a chat like his big sister. He was reaching all of his milestones, interacting with siblings, had imaginative play, excellent gross motor skills, fine motor skills. But his immune system was severely compromised. He was always sick. He was always extremely pale, had black rings under his eyes. Fast forward to 20 months, that's where he started to lose speech and language, his eye contact, started to hit his head with his fist, started to lose fine motor skills, started to having seizures, anxiety overload, couldn't get outside the front door without him having an absolute meltdown, was non-responsive, his bowel stopped working. We were lucky to get a bowel movement once a week to once every 10 days. Always sick, like I said, asthma, eczema, sensory overload, couldn't brush his teeth or hair, couldn't cut his hair. He then progressed into what we classify as a problem feeder. That is also something that I absolutely have a big passion for, any kind of picky eating or problem feeder. He went down to 5 foods, and it was predominantly what we classify as the white foods. So after me Googling, as we call it, my husband called it my Google diploma, I pretty much went in, to many of doctors and pediatricians, and they just kept saying, oh no, there's nothing going on here, Rhonda. He's got some behavioural issues. Perhaps you should do a parenting course. And here's some antidepressants because you need to calm down. And I was getting really frustrated until I put my cranky face on, and we finally got in front of someone that was taking us seriously. In May 2008, we received a diagnosis, severely autistic. By that stage, he was sitting in the corner, bashing his head on the ground, totally nonverbal, and it was a bit of a struggle, to say the least. But that's where we started to put in nutritional therapy, and I threw myself into my studies. Nutritional therapy is the foundation, I believe, identifying what's underlying and focusing on what we can put in to heal and on a cellular level. And move forward, so then we could layer all the other therapies that we needed, and whether that's children or adults. Like I said, we're not here to say that we're curing or mitigating or reversing anything, but what actually happened was, because my son started to thrive and take on board all those therapies, because he was well enough to learn and implement the tools and strategies, he actually ended up having his diagnosis removed. He did not fit into that criteria any longer. Like I said, that was not my intention. I just wanted my baby boy back. We nearly lost him twice. So like I said, it was a very, very hard journey. So on our wedding anniversary, actually May 2015, his official diagnosis was removed. The rest of the kids, there was also other health issues. Significant health issues was my daughter. She had gut issues, asthma, eczema, anxiety, that then progressed into multiple chemical sensitivities and anaphylaxis. Myself, I had health issues as a child, lots of ear, nose and throat problems, glandular fever, and then also recently was a few years ago was adrenal fatigue. So that is why my passion is in regards to integrative health, and what we're talking about today is in regards to mitochondria. So put a number 1 in the chat box if you know someone with these conditions, you know, ADD, ADHD, fatigue, food sensitivities, allergies, fibromyalgia, mental health. It's just, the list goes on. And I personally do believe that we are reaching epidemic proportions, whether it's children or for us as adults. The rate of dyslexia, autism, ADHD, allergies, food sensitivities, depression, you name it, they're all increasing at alarming rates. And most of these conditions have more than doubled in the past 20 years. You'll be able to see here, these statistics here, these were back in 2005, and these statistics were just a couple of years ago. So as you can see, to me, that is a... Sorry, we'll just, whoever's joining in, if we could just make sure that you're muting your microphone for us, so that everyone else can hear. I'll see if I can try and track you down. If you can just hear us, if you can just mute your microphone, please. Greatly appreciate it, so everyone else can actually hear us. There we go, I found it. Okay, thank you so much, Tony. Okay, so yeah, so like I was saying, these statistics were back in 2 years ago, and this one here, because I'm in Queensland, obviously in Australia, this is 1 in 50 Queensland children that actually have a diagnosis. What is more concerning is that over 70% are diagnosed too late to actually receive some funding in regards to early intervention. 2 to 3 children in each classroom have a diagnosis, 2 to 5 with autism. So I personally do believe that we are reaching epidemic proportions, and I don't think it's just a fact that people, it's, you know, the diagnostic criteria is reaching more people. I do actually think that it's a lot more than that. And what I actually classify is that these conditions, and I'm not saying if you have anxiety, you have autism, but these conditions often have intertwining underlying health aspects as to why these things are happening. And obviously worldwide we're seeing these things. So the statistics that I touched on before were Australian, and this is what we're talking about in regards to America. I personally do think we need to take notice of what's happening within our environment and what's going on. So to me, this should not be the new normal. So each generation, I firmly believe, is becoming weaker. And like I said, all of these things are intertwined, interrelated. Often we'll find, whether it's children or adults, you know, a lot of brain fog, poor focus, when we're not sleeping properly, we're fatigued, our moods are all over the place, and we often craving, you know, foods that aren't potentially the best types of foods for us. So if we can look at, in regards to any kind of neurodevelopmental or any kind of health condition as a whole body disorder, it becomes quite apparent that improving the health of our body, brain and systemic functioning is likely to affect improvements in mental health and our learning, sensory, social and behaviour. the list goes on. So as we can see, and what Belle was touching on before in regards to oxidative stress, is going to affect, you know, our nervous system, detoxification, our gastrointestinal system, our immune, our environment obviously has a big factor in regards to all of this. So as Belle touched on in regards to the mitochondrial DNA is predominantly is inherited from our mothers. So for example, my grandmother, she's 97 and still going strong. She's obviously, we've inherited her mitochondria, but as time progresses, my mother's mitochondria was obviously damaged through her environment, her lifestyle, her stresses in her life, medications, etc., things that we've been exposed to. So if you think back in regards to hunter-gatherer times, it's really important for our ancestors to remember absolutely everything they did when they were, you know, running from the tiger. That's a stressful situation. When the body feels it's in danger, additional ATP is released, reinforcing this message. It's reinforcing the memory. This is being passed down. So for example, my background, I'm Eastern European Jewish, potential Holocaust survivors. So the research is showing in regards to trauma that our ancestors have encountered is actually being passed down through the generations. So mitochondrial dysfunction, a lot of people sort of get a little bit confused as to, well, not everyone has mitochondrial dysfunction. Well, I kind of beg to differ, because unless you're living in absolutely pristine environment and eating foods that are not sprayed with chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, we are going to have some kind of mitochondrial dysfunction. And this can be actually linked to a lot of common diseases and conditions like autism and Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, even muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, learning delays, speech and language, MS, even macular degeneration. There's quite a few things which obviously, you know, we would be here for a whole day if we were listing absolutely everything. But you know, even Down syndrome, and what you'll see is that they all have they have something in common in regards to the mitochondrial ROS overproduction, which is the reactive oxygen species. So in regards to PubMed, you can jump onto this, you can Google PubMed, and you will find this is the medical research and medical library. And you'll find that, for example, neurodegenerative diseases are linked with oxidative stress and mitochondrial. So, for example, you know, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, they all have mitochondrial ROS overproduction. The same with neurodevelopmental regression, especially if triggered by an inflammatory event, gastrointestinal symptoms, seizures, motor delay, fatigue, etc. Several environmental factors, including toxins and our microbiome, our gut health, are shown to modulate the mitochondrial function in ASD tissue. There's also some fantastic and exciting research coming through in regards to mitochondrial dysfunction in bipolar disorders. The Walsh Research Institute are doing a lot of research in regards to mental health, especially bipolar. And Dr. William Walsh, he is an absolute guru, a mentor of mine. He walks into the room and we all bow down. Him and some other medical researchers and doctors are investigating the possible causes of mania has been linked to weak mitochondrial production of ATP, resulting in reduced neuron membrane voltages. So, for example, this study is actually showing, mentioning that mitochondria is actually showing as a potential target of therapeutic interventions in bipolar. So this, to me, is really, really exciting, because we actually have the opportunity to biohack ourselves, to actually take back that control. We can actually change. So in regards to the wheel of mitochondrial damage and dysfunction, it's quite a vicious cycle, like Belinda was saying. But please rest assured, this information is because we are, as health professionals, are passionate about sharing what has worked for us, our families, and our clients. And we all, you know, I'm sure you would agree, we all just want the best for our families and for us. And we just want to help to remove the symptoms that hold us back and our children back. So, for example, You know, we want to be able to express ourselves properly, or our children want to be able to express themselves, overcome fears and anxiety, ultimately become independent adults. As much as, you know, I want to keep my babies close to me, we want them to fly the coop, and we want them to be, pardon me, functional, and to be able to get jobs and have healthy relationships, and hopefully give me lots of grandchildren. But if, you know, if we're not addressing the root causes, then the reason we're sick is because we can't heal. You know, if you can't heal, you can't recover. And this is what we're talking about today. So in regards to mitochondrial function changes to fight infections, to learn and to heal, we've kind of touched on in regards to inflammation. So mitochondria, when it's injured, you can see here the mitochondria, when it's connected, it becomes disconnected. So when it's a bit like signaling the molecules in all stages of the healing cycle. So whenever we have blocks in the healing cycle caused by the cell danger response, which I'll touch on a little bit down the track, the cell danger response to persistent abnormal, it causes blocks, and it's causes, you know, hundreds of chronic disorders. So when we activate certain pathways in our bodies, we can assist to reduce this free radical damage, reduce the oxidative stress, which in turn helps us to downregulate the cell danger response, which enables our mitochondria to heal and to replenish and replicate healthy cells. Unblocking that healing cycle restores normal metabolism. It decreases systems and accelerate healing and predominantly developmental milestones. So what we predominantly want, we see this cell danger response is essential for healing after any injury. And the cell danger response creates that physiological sensation of stress. So like I was talking about, you know, being chased by a tiger, etc. It must be activated and then inactivated. So it's then connected and disconnected. And then we want it to inactivate again to complete the healing cycle. But that's where the problem lies. We are turning off that we need to turn off the inflammation in order to heal as nature intended. So, for example, what we're often finding is that when we're not getting this, when it's constantly in the injury or inflamed state, it leads to chronic disease or chronic dysfunction, illness. And stats from back in 2012 from American study, we were finding that 30% of children were in this constant mode of inflammation. And like I mentioned before, studies back in 2005, things are increasing. So currently we're seeing a 4 to 5-fold increase, especially in children, in regards to inflammatory markers, inflammatory conditions, ADHD, autism, asthma, inflammatory bowel conditions, anxiety disorders, etc. So that cell danger response is a universal response to injury. It's normal, okay? And these are some of the things that obviously indicate in regards to injury and chronic diseases. And if we're constantly being exposed to these dangers and these stresses, etc., then it's going to be hindering our health on a cellular level. But there are things that we can do to naturally combat this. So people are sort of wondering, you know, they say to me, I get messages, etc., the cellular response. So what it's pretty much saying is that our cells are interpreting our environment as a dangerous place. And I think that's heartbreaking, because, you know, we just want the best for our babies. We want to be living in a healthy environment. But chronic disease results because of the blocks in the health cycle. So we can decrease the risk to unborn children if we pay attention to all of these things. Obviously, it's not a quick fix. It's not going to happen overnight. It takes time, and it's a shift in awareness. But if we're paying attention to improving our food, you know, eating real food, trying to recover the health of our planet, then in fact we can actually start to make some positive changes. So I won't go right into the cycle of, you know, the stages of the healing cycle. But what we were talking about before is that healing cycle may be the root of many complex chronic health issues, because it's like we're not getting back to the actual healthy stage. So, for example, some here today, we have family members with autism or ADHD or multiple chemical sensitivities, mental health conditions. If they've been exposed to certain chemicals or stresses, this may be disruptive to their mental health or their energy, their behavior. They may be more sensitive than neurotypical children or adults that seemingly have no health issues. It's because we have a memory of the past exposure, and every time they're being stressed, they now have an increased capacity. So sometimes we're overreacting to that stressful environment. So most mainstream practitioners, obviously, they mean well, and they wouldn't get into the health industry unless they want to help people, but they are predominantly trained to use fixes for acute problems. So, for example, the medicines that they're using are designed to treat and the things that are killing or injuring a person quickly. And for example, insulin, it's used to treat diabetes, but it's not a cure. Okay, it's not going to heal that condition. Like statins, for abnormal amounts of lipids like triglycerides, cholesterol, it's not going to cure it. Like EpiPens or puffers. Every single medicine is designed this way. And don't get me wrong, there's definitely a time and a place for all these things. But I personally like to look at, well, why? Why are these things happening? And working alongside, qualified health professionals who actually investigate, the use of herbs and supplementation, activation, qualities and techniques, this is actually truly identifying what's happening and unblocking that healing cycle so we can actually heal as nature intended. Because really, healing occurs naturally after 99% of most injuries. So whether it's acute illness by infection or a broken bone, obviously we need medical intervention, but our body is designed to heal naturally, and all it needs is a nutritious environment, good food, active play, good sleep to achieve that vibrant health. So there are ways that we can get around it. And touching on that inflammation, in regards to a sprained ankle or a broken bone and things like that, like Belinda was talking about before, this is a perfectly natural response. We need to have small amounts of inflammation. So, for example, if the body's being attacked by bacteria or viruses that enter the bloodstream, that's perfectly normal. But the inflammatory process is only supposed to be temporary. And when the body it has to reduce that inflammation in order to help heal and produce that healing cycle. Prolonged inflammation leads to serious health consequences. So it's a bit like, instead of having the Bunsen burner, we've got a fire hydrant. We need a fire hydrant to try and put it out. Some of the signs of inflammation is inability to focus and concentrate, our cognitive ability, our speech and language, eczema, behavioral issues, headaches all the time, trouble sleeping, itchy, things like that. And that can also impact on our gut health. So in regards to the gut health, and I appreciate you're probably not going to be able to read this very well, but it's pretty much just a prompt for me. So in regards to if we don't have the right beneficial bacteria, like we're 90% bacteria, 10% health, human, if we don't have the right beneficial bacteria, if we've got imbalances, that's going to lead to in excess butyrate, and butyrate creates mitochondrial dysfunction and oxidative stress, and it's just a real vicious cycle. Leading on to that, our environment and chemicals and processed foods, medications also impact on our gut health. In regards to chemicals, there's a fantastic research happening with Dr. Stephanie Seneff and Dr. William Shaw from America. There's a lot of research in regards to glyphosate, and predominantly this is about autism, but if you monitor the increase of glyphosate and track the actual prevalence of autism, it mimics, it's pretty much following each other. So that is, to me, is a real concern, because glyphosate actually it attacks our beneficial intestinal bacterial species because they are sensitive to glyphosate. However, harmful bacteria species such as Clostridia, they're not sensitive to glyphosate, and so they actually their numbers are increased after glyphosate exposure. glyphosate has made its way into our food supply. I'm not sure if a lot of people know that about 90% of all of our corn and soy and even wheat are actually treated with this toxic chemical. We really need to take note. And there's a lot of studies coming through America where, for example, Dr. William Shaw had a study of triplets, and 2 male children had autism and 1 of the female siblings had a seizure disorder, and all 3 had hugely elevated levels of urinary glyphosate. And so what that actually showed when they did some research, they were predominantly eating a lot of corn, a lot of genetically modified food. So this is something that we need to be aware of. And unfortunately, Dr. Stephanie Seneff is predicting that autism could affect 1 in 2 children by the year 2025, 2030, due to glyphosate and chemical exposure. Along with and I know it sounds like all doom and gloom, but trust me, there's things that we can do. Environmental factors also come back to what we're putting on our skin. You know, this is just a study that they did just within 1 week in regards to what us females put on our skin. You know, perfume and shampoos and our partners and then our children. So anything we put on our skin pretty much is absorbed within 26 seconds. Then we've got the toxins within our home. You know, what we're cooking our food in, any kind of flame retardants, what we're cleaning our homes with, our carpets, etc. Indoor air quality, Wi-Fi, children constantly spraying themselves with full-on chemicals. Especially our teenagers having 3 sons. I know what that's like. They like to spray it up big time. But we do need to, try to steer them towards a roll-on or something, because this can be really, really problematic. Wi-Fi is, I don't know about you guys, but 5G, it's coming. And to me, that is really super concerning. We cannot escape oxidative stress. It is just left, right, and center. The chemical load that we are passing down in regards to what is passing, like Belinda was talking about, mitochondrial DNA, we're actually inheriting these dodgy mitochondrial cells, but also what we're breathing in and drinking and eating and putting on our skin, all of the medications, etc. There was a study in 2013 by the Canadian watchdog group Environmental Defence. We are unwittingly actually, poisoning our babies before they're even born. There was a study of 137 toxins found in the umbilical cord. 132 were reported to cause cancer in humans or animals. 110 considered toxic to the brain and the nervous system. And 133 caused developmental and reproductive problems. When we're waiting for our babies to arrive or our grandchildren, that's the last thing we want. 1 in 6 Australian children now have a learning or behavioural or immune disorder, and research indicates that a significant causative factor in this epidemic may be their early life exposure to toxic metals and chemicals. There's over 4,000 chemicals registered every single day on the planet. And I'm very concerned, what tests are actually being done for this long-term exposure. So these are all the things that we need to take into consideration. And this is in regards to our cells and the mitochondria. And up on the far left-hand corner here, I'm not sure how well you can see that, but that's actually a balloon that they put tiny little pinholes in and then filled it up. It's a water balloon. And what you can see is when it's under stress, it actually leaks, and it turns out our cells release cell content in order to signal their neighbouring cells when they're stressed. And the amount of information released depends on the amount of stress it feels it is encountering. And like I said, that cellular response, where our bodies are actually feeling like they're always stressed. So mitochondria generate 90% of the free radicals in our cells as they make ATP. So when we have high levels of that free radical damage, your body is creating more and more oxidative stress, inflammation, which then leads to mitochondrial dysfunction. So I hope you can see this is the cycle of it. The mitochondrial talks to the nucleus, and mitochondrial sense and respond to the dangers in our cellular environment. So if we're losing this valuable energy source, the ATP is a valuable energy source, if we're constantly losing that for signaling purposes, then the cell has to work twice as hard, sometimes even harder, in order to provide that energy for normal, healthy growth and development. So what can we do? How do we reduce the energy lost so we have more energy for the cell? So what we've been talking about now is, obviously what all the conditions and stuff, what we're looking at is what's underlying, okay? So, and the reason I do that is because not only for our own cells, but, we need to look at future generations. What is the cost of these conditions on the individual and within the families and the community and our countries, the economy. So if we can find something that we can do within ourselves, within our families, then to me that is how we step up. So what if we could use an all-natural supplementation to help activate mitochondria, open up the cell in order to help rid the free radical damage, reduce the oxidative stress, and reduce the cellular response. Instead of having a dodgy mitochondria and all this oxidative stress, we need to look at what's underlying, like I was talking about, in regards to what's underlying. So if we can actually start to identify exactly what's harming and remove what is harming, replenish with what's going to heal, so we can activate our body so it works as nature intended, then this won't be happening. If we lay the foundations, that's the way forward. And we need to be open to opportunities, okay? I always recommend everyone that I work with in clinic, find your tribe, surround yourself with people that are going to lift you up. So what can we do? So I've thrown myself into nutrigenomics and I've been studying it since 2008, because that is, to me, the future of medicine. Excuse me, just muting my phone. And it's pretty much an emerging tool in nutrition. So nutrigenomics means using natural compounds and ingredients to have an effect on your genes. And it really leverages. So you can use food and herbs, etc., as medicine to help people finally feel better. A functional integrative approach, like Belinda was saying, when we use that within our clients, we create individualized nutrient therapy and lifestyle plans that actually work, and it gives you the skills you need to truly get to the root causes of the issues, etc., and guide you to health, even if you've been everywhere and you've been trying 11.8 million different things. So again, nutrigenomics, it's out there. It is, to me, it is the way of the future. Have a look on PubMed. So nutrigenomics, like I was talking about, it's a really super exciting pathway that we can actually start to biohack our bodies, okay? So activating our DNA pathway, that's what I absolutely love to do in regards to nutrient therapy, etc. So activation falls into the category of nutrigenomics, which, like I said, we're using natural compounds and ingredients to have an effect on our genes. It doesn't mean we're turning, my brown eyes blue or anything like that. It just means that we're activating and turning on our pathways that are already in our bodies that previously just been switched off because of oxidative stress. So Fox News recently reported that nutrigenomics is changing everything. Where we once thought we were powerless is now an area over which we have at least some control. So the ability to use nutrition. We're no longer at the mercy of our DNA. This is so far beyond taking supplements, which obviously, most of us still need, because most of us have nutrient imbalances, vitamins and minerals, essential fatty acids, etc. We can target those particular needs. Eating good food, obviously, as a nutritional therapist, I promote eating really, whole foods, but it really just, it's hard. We can't get enough of it. Our soils are so depleted, it's really just not enough for what we need today, because our environment's so toxic. So what we're trying to do is obviously get to the cellular health and biohack the cells to turn on our body's production of protection against the environment that we're currently living in. All right. So nutrigenomics, this is another way to explain how we can actually hack our body and actually take control. So this bar graph shows genetic expression of our genes. So, they're the survival genes. You'll notice the red bars, they're all over the place, up and down. Low means that, they're not being expressed enough. High means it's causing trouble. It's being expressed way too much. We have the choice now to activate our body to change that. And this is what happens when we actually do start to activate our body. Like I was talking about, nutrigenomics is a lot more than food, and we can't just use food anymore. What we're trying to do is, increase our own glutathione and all of our internal antioxidants, catalase and superoxide dismutase, and regulate more than 400 survival genes. So pretty much it levels our playing field, and this is how our genes were programmed to function when we were kids. I'm sure most of us would identify and absolutely love to have half the energy of our kids running around. So when we can bring our gene expression back into that level by activating our genes, it reduces the oxidative stress, it improves our mitochondrial function. And this is why I've been doing all these free webinars, because to me, as a professional, a health professional with first-hand experience, I'm very passionate about passing my knowledge on to others, so they don't go through the same, arduous journey that I went through. So nutrigenomics, like I was talking about, food is obviously medicine, but food is just not enough. So in regards to reducing our oxidative stress, there's lots of foods that are natural antioxidants. However, like I was saying, we cannot eat enough to reduce our oxidative stress that we are encountering from our environment. So, for example, 1 tub of blueberries is 6,500 antioxidants. That's like having a glass of water and expecting to put out the house fire, the building. What we need is a lot more than that. We need to activate our internal antioxidants, etc. So that in order then helps with the mitochondria. So our body has millions of free radicals at any one time, like Belinda was saying. And through science and nutrigenomics, epigenetics, scientists have actually discovered pathways in the body that we can actually activate our internal antioxidants again. The normal aging process, all of our endogenous, our internal antioxidants actually stop working around 20 to 25 because of the natural aging process, but even faster because our environment is becoming so toxic. So if we can switch back on our endogenous antioxidants, then we're going to produce millions like nature intended. So that's a bit like having all the sprinklers come on in every single room, and plus you've got the fire brigade there as well. So it's natural anti-aging as well. It's turning back the clock. Okay, so just about running out of time. We're just about finished. So putting this into perspective, knowledge is power, okay? Having that integrative approach, working with health professionals who are open, is definitely, in my view, the future of medicine. This is the most effective approach, ensuring that diet supports gut function, and that gut function supports the supplementation that we're taking or activation, and that biochemistry supports the neurotransmission, and cognitive function in turn supports the neuro and behavioral therapies that we're spending a lot of time and money taking our children to, or psychologist or whatever that we're doing as well. So promising results within many pediatric disorders are taking place because of this bio-individual approach. It is addressing the root causes. It's addressing that cellular health, which is a key component in any disease prevention. So increased cellular and digestive health leads to an improvement in the nutrient uptake. So, for example, you are what you eat. I say you are what you absorb, and most people aren't absorbing. So this is going to improve that nutrient uptake, which in turn assists with neurotransmission in the brain, enabling us or our child to benefit more from the therapies that we're doing, improve speech and language, literacy, the auditory and visual processing, whether that's, Erlen or whatever it might be, sensory integration and motor coordination. Okay. So I'd just like to finish up on these slides. I just think that this is absolutely beautiful because we are energy. And in regards to our children, we all just want the best for our children and our children's children. We have the knowledge. We pretty much, the choice is ours whether we move forward with that or not. I just like to leave it with people in regards to, I really do think we are in epidemic proportions. I really do think that our children are like the canaries in the coal mine. They are extremely sensitive, and they are telling us that our world is absolutely toxic and it's nutrient deficient. So whether that's, the foods that we're eating, or, just the soils and the genetically modified, or pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, the water that we're using on those plants. Most childhood disorders have similar underlying causes and contributing factors. So whether that's nutrient imbalances or bacterial imbalances, the oxidative stress or the mitochondrial dysfunction, all of these things are contributing factors. And we can all learn a lot by applying these same principles for health and healing. So I'm sure you all have questions, and I'm probably wondering how you can get your hands on these activators that can help to reduce our oxidative stress and protect us from oxidative stress, and improve our sleep and sleep quality, reduce pain in the body, obviously, and heal. Whether you're an athlete, you're wanting more energy, or whether you're fatigued, you just need energy. Maybe, anxiety or depression, help with our liver function, our digestion, anything to do with just cellular healing in every single cell of the body. We all just want improved general health and well-being. So I do encourage you to go back to the person who invited you here today, so they, perhaps they can actually answer some of the questions if you have something in particular. If I've invited you, feel free to come back to me. If Belle's invited you, again. So if you're motivated and want to make real changes, we look forward to hearing from you all. Feel free to message us, or email, or give us a call. I hope this has been helpful for you. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I just want to say thank you for your time, and I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm going to